Welcome to your Artsy Girl podcast. I am your host, Christina Carrere. This is a podcast about art, poetry, and anything about creativity. Sit back, relax, and get your dose of brain food to get your creative juices flowing. Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 10. Today's featured guest is Jo Reyes-Boitel. She is a poet and writer. Her education includes Bachelor's in American Studies, 2007, from the University of Texas at San Antonio, and she focuses on ethnic music expressions within dominant culture. Her publications include Scalawag Journal, forthcoming, Windward Review, forthcoming, Voz de Esperanza, Chachalaca Review, San Antonio Express News, Dismantle, Borderlands, to name a few. She also has performances under her belt, a one-woman performance piece, This Body, at Works in Progress at Jumpstart Performance Company, February 2019. Nahual, a one-act play written and directed for World Theater Day 2014 with one-night-only performance at Palo Alto Community College. Her awards include Alfredo Cisneros del Moral Foundation Award winner, granted by Sandra Cisneros, 2001. She is also a workshop leader, community-based small group instruction with focus on people of color, working class communities, and currently is teaching a monthly workshop at Gemini Link. She is the co-founder, This City is a Poem, annual National Poetry Month initiative providing daily poetry writing prompts for local and national audiences. April 2019 is a spotlight on women and femme poets. Please welcome Jo Reyes-Boitel. Hi, Jo. Thank you for coming on the show and giving me and the audience a chance to learn more about you and your work.
For having me.
Thank you. Thank you for coming on. You have an interesting book coming out. And what is particularly cool about it is the structure and the premise of it. First, it's a novel in verse form. And secondly, is that the subject matter is cool. Can you explain to us what this novel in prose is all about?
Thanks. So it's called Michael and Josephine, and it's centered on two folks who are navigating love. Already a difficult thing, but one is a disaster relief worker, Josephine, and who's very committed to community and puts that first in her life. And the other is Saint Michael the Archangel, reimagined as a queer woman who, as you know, is obviously busy with the turmoils in our world today.
Okay, so how did you come up with this story?
You interviewed recently Irene Lara Silva, and I have her to thank for it. I submitted her with tears in my eyes a 80 or so page manuscript that dealt with a lot of the difficulties of my growing up, including poverty and just masculine toxicity, abuse, a number of things, an array of ways to show abuse within a household. And she broke my heart because she told me, this is not your first book. This isn't ready. This is difficult. And she told me to put it away, and I didn't want to talk to her for a little bit. And I've since apologized. But she told me for a couple of days to just write down the things that I loved. And it was difficult because I had gone through this. As I wrote, I was definitely processing. And so I thought, let me go way the other way. And so I wanted to talk about love. And I had struggled a bit because, as a writer in community, there's no shortage of opportunities to discuss the way the world is now, the way the world has been, our history, the founding of this nation. I mean, these are huge things.
Right.
And love sometimes gets put aside or we forget. But I think that the sheer act of talking about those things comes from love. So I had this huge idea of love, and I didn't know what I was going to do with it. I knew I loved a cup of coffee. Some days that was the only thing that I could love. Other days that someone said hello or that I bought a scarf that made me happy.
Yeah.
And I ended up with seeing this feather, and a couple of feathers for a couple of days kept showing up.
Huh.
And I didn't know what it meant. And I thought, because of course Google is so easily available, I thought I'm going to check it out, see what it might mean as a symbol. And so this idea came up near the top of my searches. It said that is when St. Michael is visiting you.
Wow.
And so for that, the next day I woke up and I wrote, and every day I wrote 1 to 2 new poems. And at the end of the month, I had 30 to 35 poems all on this theme.
Oh my goodness. That just gave me chills. Oh my gosh. And it's interesting because I dig the archangels, man. Let me tell you.
Yeah.
I believe Archangel Michael is like my guidance. It's
my gosh,
like my guide.
Me too. Yep. I was born on his day.
Oh, no kidding.
The Catholic Church day. Yeah.
But oh my gosh, what a premise that is. And this is an aside because one of my favorite. This is corny as heck. My favorite movie is what is that one with
that tall dude, right? The
Nicolas Cage.
Oh gosh, yes, I'm trying to remember the name.
Something of City of Angels.
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
Yes.
That to me, I was like, I know it's corny.
That's corny. Yeah.
But it's just the premise of the whole. I mean, the premise of the angel falling out of grace and then giving up eternity for this woman. Oh my goodness. I was like, how can you beat that? But yeah, so you got the message through, you got this, I want to say, symbolism coming up in your dreams and your awakenings. So that gave you the idea of this whole thing, right? So in disaster relief, wow. Any particular disaster it was?
I cover a few of them in the book. And what was interesting is that I wrote only about St. Michael for a good 2 weeks. And then suddenly I wrote a poem about Josephine, and I didn't have a name or anything. She just popped up. And I called 3 or 4 friends saying, Josephine showed up.
Wow.
This other character showed up, and I really thought it would just be Michael. And, if we live our lives on our own, there are very few people that are going to question us. So there's no challenge. So it was interesting to have like a foil or somebody who's going to kind of challenge the archangel.
Right.
So, yeah.
Well, I don't want to spoil, do a spoiler alert, but definitely, I mean, that alone is just, it's worthy of a read. The whole premise of it is just very, very intriguing. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself? Where are you from?
I was born in Minnesota, and it's a traditional immigrant story because my father is from South Texas. His grandparents are from Mexico, in Guerrero, just south of the border. And he lived most of his life in South Texas until he went to Vietnam. And when he came back, he, on the GI Bill, ended up in school in Minnesota because his sister was there. So that was already chance, I think. And then my mother was born in Havana, just outside of Havana. And my grandfather moved the family to Miami when she was 16. Her mother died about a year or 2 after. So they ended up moving to Minnesota, where he had one brother. My grandfather had one brother there who had acclimated so well that even his wife and daughter didn't know that he was Cuban. They thought he was a white man. So my mom to this day still says that if she'd spoken better English, she would not have ended up with my father. So we were in Minnesota for a bit and then moved back to South Florida for a bit and then ended up moving to Texas.
Okay. Yeah, I see that you are also a San Antonio-based artist. And in your bio, you state you're also an artist, a performance artist, and playwright. How did you make that transition from, say, performance to print?
I always did print. Performance is the new thing for me.
Ah, okay.
So it started a couple of years ago, what I called the year of no. And so my goal was to get as many no's for submissions as I could.
Uh-huh.
Because
interesting. Let me pause there for a minute. Uh-huh. Okay. That is an interesting way of approaching it. So instead of the dreaded gathering of all these rejection letters, right? Mm-hmm. So you're like, okay, so how many no's can I get? And you make it like a game, right? Like a challenge. So go ahead.
I removed some of that power, Right. I wanted to, I figured the more no's that I got, that there'd be some yeses in there. Mm-hmm. So it's been pretty lucky. I mean, I did it 1 year and it just kept going. So I'm still in my year of no's. And I've been able to enjoy some really unique opportunities. So I wrote my first play, a one-woman play, and directed it because they didn't have anybody directing it. So I was like, I guess I'm doing it. And that was a challenge for me.
What was the name of the play?
Nahual. So it was, in a way, the story for that was a woman who had just lost her partner. Mm-hmm. In my head, to breast cancer, but I didn't say specifically, but it was a way of addressing loss and how we memorialize someone and how we are still here and what we should try to do since we're still here. And then to compound it, the person who remains is butch and brought up or holding herself in to not feel all this emotion. Mm-hmm. To try and stay stoic and tough for everyone else, and in the meantime feeling all of these things and not knowing where to put them. Mm-hmm. So it was a challenge for me. I wrote it in that I had a number of friends who were going through some really life-changing events. People that they were very close to had left.
Right.
And I didn't know what to tell them, and what can you say that's ever sufficient?
Right.
But I knew that there was the emotion, and to acknowledge that was important to me.
So you performed this as well?
No, I had a very good friend, Juanita Alcala, perform it for me. She's a theater person. I wrote it and directed it, and she was actually helpful in just sitting with me and correcting me as her. She's a seasoned actor, and I was the young playwright, and so it was helpful.
I always am amazed. Playwriting and film is something that I've always wanted to do. How did it feel for you to see your writing come to life?
I want to say that it really was like, it's not in my hands anymore. Mm-hmm. There was that element that it's like out in the world. It's something else now. And if anything, I felt the people performing it and putting that air or that energy to the words made it so much more than what I could have offered on a page. Yes.
Wow, that's an amazing feat. Do you intend to write some more of that?
Yeah, I do. And I just did a performance based on a long form poem I'm working on that addresses, it's called This Body. And it addresses my trying to just keep going despite chronic illness. Mm-hmm. And I have fibromyalgia. Mm-hmm. So in working with some of that and still enjoying the life I have, because I'm still here,
Right. Absolutely. You also do some community-based work in the arts. Can you explain a little more about what you do and how did you get involved with it?
Sure. My early years writing, there were no shortage of poetry readings, and often they were politically motivated or, trying to acquire a space and calling out or screaming out your poems to create a space. Mm-hmm. During rallies. I think that protests end up being, a space where most of us realize we have a voice. But as I single parented, it got harder. I had to create a real life and regular schedule for a little girl. And so I changed the way that I worked within my community. It meant I had to be more honest, and I and I'm always struggling with that, to just be more honest. Oftentimes I'll start saying something, then I'm like, no, I don't mean that. I mean this. And I have to get to another level of honesty for myself and for those around me. And so I do write around issues that are of importance to my community. Mm-hmm. And also currently right now I'm working with Gemini Inc. I teach or I lead a writing workshop that they have once a month.
Okay.
And it's been really good. The response has been really nice. We have a lot of actual non-members who might not otherwise know about the organization, but it does a lot within community. So I feel like I'm offering another kind of outreach that they wouldn't have otherwise.
Do you feel doing community-based work fuels your own creativity?
Definitely. I miss writing every day. I strive to write every day, even if it's a line. But sometimes getting there, like each month we look at a different poetic device or a different theme. And so like this last month was about home. Mm-hmm. And it lets me write. You know, folks are always surprised that I'm writing right with them, and I have to remind them 2 minutes, and I have to remind myself 2 minutes more to write, close it up. So I get a lot of really good leads, and it kind of fuels me for the next few weeks.
What works influenced you, and how did you decide to write poetry or prose?
I had access to poetry just in school like others. My mom wasn't, this big. Well, my mom was a good reader. She liked to read, but she read trash. So I enjoyed all the trash that she had. There were way too many biographies of serial killers in the house. Oh. And
I was wondering what you meant by trash.
Yeah. And Santeria handbooks, which were probably not.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, they all kind of go together. A lot of conspiracy theorists or biographies of JFK, things like that. Oh. It was a unique time. I probably had a nice slice of understanding of the 60s and 70s based on my mom's book choices. But it was a time of real questioning, so it doesn't hurt. That didn't hurt entirely. So when I grew up, within the school system, public school system, I'd see your obvious like Emily Dickinson, William Carlos Williams, Carl Sandburg, and I loved all of them. And I loved anything I could get my hands on. I mean, there were horrible limericks in the Highlights magazine that I was happy to have. I didn't care. I was an indiscriminate reader. I think most can teach us something.
I like to ask this question to most of my guests because I think it tells a lot about a person. How did you know you were an artist? How old were you when you realized this?
I had to get glasses at 10. Mm-hmm. And it was then that I realized that I had to be an artist because I couldn't see anything before and I didn't know. And my family needed glasses, so nobody thought to have me checked. So it was a free kind of eye check at school. Mm-hmm. And after that, I realized that across the street, not 20 feet from me, was a house that instead of having wood planks like our house, which I could see, it had this stucco kind of face. And that was just the most amazing thing to me, that the sun would come down and offer light and shadow on one surface. Wow.
So your vision, you got your glasses. I thought
trees were like a big bush, not leaves. Like I didn't click.
So you felt that after you got the glasses that it opened this whole world for you?
I knew I had to document it.
That's beautiful. Do you have any set routines or rituals, or are you pretty much free-flowing?
I'm definitely free-flowing. I love a ritual, but it can get in the way. It can, because then if you don't have this perfect storm of events, then it's not going to happen, Yeah. When my daughter was younger, it was great. She'd still sleep, if I'm talking like when she was 4 or 5. Mm-hmm. She'd wake up super early. I could feed her something. She'd go back to bed on a weekend and I could write for another, 2 or 3 hours. Mm-hmm. I love that with a cup of coffee. So, and I love writing late at night into morning. If I have even a 3-day weekend, I'm suddenly on night owl again. But other than that, I have my notebook all the time or my phone all the time.
Oh, good. So you do carry a notebook with you Good. What is one advice, or several advice if you'd like to give someone who would like to get into poetry? Now, I understand your community-based work with Gemini Inc. One of your mission statement is to include those who would not otherwise feel welcome or feel awkward. What kind of advice you would give to that person about their interest in getting into poetry?
I hear a lot of, and I've seen it a lot, I believe it to some extent, this idea that you aren't a writer unless you're writing. But I do think that something should be said. If someone shows an interest and says, I want to learn this, that they're already naming themselves and don't realize that. Right. There is like a change, right? A paradigm shift when you've said, I want to learn this. So from there, I think the big thing is find out your view of the world and really just take it on. Make it the tool with which you see things. If you come from a particular background, don't shy away from it. Don't shy away from telling the truth that you see or need to see. And then as you write, you gain more and more tools. You end up creating a larger cosmos surrounding you. And
thinking about my humble beginnings, started liking poetry, of course, in high school as a form of, just expression. I didn't know what it was as an art form or anything like that. I mean, if I read my old poems, then I cringe. But, it wasn't until like I was in my early 20s that I decided to read a little more, and it was my Jack Kerouac phase. And I like the beatnik that type, that spoke to me then, it was the grit. It was like, yes. And then when I went into my first creative writing course in community college, that pretty much, blew the door wide open for me. And that's when I decided that not only do I want to be a poet, but I think I'll go ahead and study poetry. And I got my MFA many years later. But, that's how it starts. So it's the interest. And I think what you're providing to the community and to that person who does want to explore that is the avenue, the portal. Without that portal to the poetry world, most of us will just be standing at the fringes, right?
We'll keep saying it. We won't say this is our year of no, or this is our year of yes.
Yeah. And to claim, what? I'm an artist. What? I am a poet. It took me many, many years to say that. And it was very liberating and very empowering when I finally said to my family, guess what? I'm a poet. I'm an artist. And
they were like, I know. We know already. Because everybody knows but you, right? I felt like that.
No, they're like, we know. You're a weirdo.
Exactly. That's what my brother says.
Oh, well, it was great talking to you. Thank you so much, Jo, for being my featured guest today and for sharing with us your new book. And I certainly will provide the link to where folks can order it. And can you tell me when that's going to be published, or has it been published already?
It's out. It was live a couple of days ago.
Oh, okay, good.
It's on Amazon now.
Yay!
I know. So,
I will go ahead and put that link there. And your website, do you have the website also?
I do. It's Jo Reyes-Boitel, JoReyesBoitel.com. Longest website address ever.
No, not really. I've seen some long ones. Well, I look forward to seeing more of you and your work in the future. And I wish you the very best. And let's keep in touch. Keep spreading art, inspiring others, and keep writing. Well, everyone, that's it for now. Please stay tuned for my featured guest next week. In the meantime, stay inspired and have a productive and creative week. Bye, Jo.
Bye, Christina.